Mets fans, today's a great day. If you're wondering, Wardy, why exactly is that? The reason is, it's another day to break down the latest news and rumblings in Mets land, but this is a video in particular that I'm more excited about than others to get into. And as much as I thoroughly enjoyed our breakdown, technically today, around 12:30 a.m. Eastern on December 4th, for our first of two videos I have dropped on the Luis Robert trade interest, Eugenio Suarez being a viable DH option for the club, Freddie Peralta trade talk, and much more that you guys can check out after watching this video. Today's video is going to hit a little bit differently because not only has been now reported that the New York Mets are in fact showing interest in Joe Ryan, one of the most coveted pitchers in this year's trade market that we're going to break down extensively as we've done in the past. But what if I told you that the Mets don't have an appetite just for Joe Ryan from the Minnesota Twins? What if I told you that they absolutely love Byron Buxton? We're going to get into the potential blockbuster trade that could be had for the Mets this offseason and landing both an ace caliber starter and a dynamic bat and outfielder in Buxton, and what it would take to land him and where Jonathan falls in this conversation. All I ask is that you guys hit that like and subscribe button on your way in. Let me know your initial thoughts, reactions, and analysis to the potential blockbuster of the Mets making a trade happen, unlike maybe anything fans could fathom this offseason until it becomes reality. Joe Ryan, Byron Buxton, in a New York Mets uniform. How can it happen? Will it happen? That's what we're going to break down, so I want to hear all your thoughts about it down below. Thank you guys again for 36,000 subscribers. Help us get to our next short-term goal of 40,000 here on the platform. And of course, as a thank you for 36K, we're giving away a jersey to one lucky subscriber Monday, December 8th, and day 2 of MLB winter meeting coverage here on the platform. We're going to be live for multiple hours every single day of winter meetings beginning this Sunday. But on Monday in particular, we'll be giving away that jersey to one lucky subscriber on the platform that wants a brand new Mets jersey. So be on the lookout, everybody, as well as check out our amazing sponsor at SeatGeek that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Simply utilize my promo code WARDY10 because you're going to get 10% off whatever you need in the ticketing space, whether that is, of course, NBA tickets, NHL tickets, NFL tickets, concerts, comedies, you name it, all things ticketing. Look no further than our awesome friends at SeatGeek. Use my promo code WARDY10, link down below for 10% off. Now, without further ado, everybody, let's get right into this and let's break down where this reporting stems from today, everybody. And at the end of the show, we'll also talk about some miscellaneous Mets topics that are separate from this conversation on this potential blockbuster for the New York Mets that I think you guys should be informed on nonetheless because it's still relevant in Mets land. Now, let's deviate away from these Joe Ryan highlights, but we'll certainly come back to them because we got a lot to say on Joe today, and this all stems from the following, everybody. You guys saw it. I saw it as well. Let's take a look here. Here is on my X page, over 70,000 followers. You guys can, of course, follow should you have interest for all things Mets related, including my videos I drop on X as well. Here, Mets trade rumors from yours truly. Mets are among teams showing interest in starting pitcher Joe Ryan, per John Heyman of the New York Post. He came out with a piece earlier today on this exact topic. Furthermore, Heyman went on to break down how the Twins are believed to like Jonathan and a potential deal. And I stated, obviously, in order for Joe Ryan to be pried away from the Twins with the club control that he has and the ace caliber upside, of course the Twins are looking for a king's ransom headlined by a top pitching prospect going the other way. But here is where this gets all the more interesting, because this article, again, came out from the New York Post that you guys can see here from the New York Post Sports page today, and shout out to them. Been very grateful to be a recurring contributor there. But what if I told you that it doesn't just stop at Joe Ryan, okay? Because this is what makes it all the more interesting, because we've had a lot of proper discourse that we have seen not only on X as well as on YouTube for many times that we've had the Joe Ryan discussion in the past, and the commonality has been, you know what, Wardy, I would have loved Joe Ryan in this rotation, but I don't know if I'm really willing to give up multiple top assets for someone like him, whereas maybe the Mets could do better elsewhere in either the free agent and or trade market. While I respect all those opinions, and while I myself do not want to see Jonathan, one of our top pitching prospects in particular, be dealt anytime soon, every man has a price, and it's as simple as that. And for me personally, that man's price is not just Joe Ryan, but pairing Joe Ryan with Byron Buxton. Now you may find yourself asking, Wardy, what are you talking about regarding Byron Buxton? And no, I'm not even referencing the video that we did just over 24 hours ago on Jeff Passan linking the Mets to not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but a whopping 13 trade candidates to varying degrees, currently having Byron Buxton at a 35% rate to be traded this offseason, with the New York Mets as the second top suitor land him, just trailing, again, Buxton's a Georgia native, so of course the Atlanta Braves are in that conversation. But it's not just about Jeff Passan's speculation that he, of course, has it backed by his industry sources. I'm here to tell you personally, comfortably, from everything that I know in the industry, the Mets love Byron Buxton, and they have been involved in his market for a good stretch of time now. Now, of course, you guys can take this with a grain of salt should you wish. You don't even have to believe me if you don't want to, but I never go out of my way to relay this information unless, one, I'm unbelievably confident, and two, I have nothing to lie about. I cover every single player the Mets are connected to under the sun every single offseason. If you're a follower on the platform, you know that very well. I have said verbatim constantly how the processes go in the offseason. When I'm relayed information, when I'm allowed to actually release some of that, I most certainly will. And as a surprise to absolutely nobody, now that BLOCKBUSTER has been traded, the Mets are evaluating all outfield options in a way that can upgrade their outfield from what it currently was with BLOCKBUSTER and his lack of defense. And in this proper evaluation for the Mets, trying to figure out who makes most sense for them, Byron Buxton has been one of the key names that has constantly found himself in that conversation. The only question that we really have right now is, do the Mets have more of an appetite for Byron Buxton than, say, a Cody Bellinger or a Kyle Tucker or a Luis Robert? I'm not entirely sure. And that uncertainty is what makes this all the more interesting when we have this conversation today. So again, you guys can, of course, not believe me. That's perfectly fine. You're entitled to do that. But I assure you that separate from the wide range of reporting from Jeff Passan and many other credible people in this space connecting the Mets to Byron Buxton, I'm not even referencing those articles. I'm talking solely about what I know in the industry, and Byron Buxton is someone that the Mets would love to have at the right price. And that's what this will all come down to at the end of the day. Because if you're going to try to land a blockbuster trade for an ace caliber starter and a dynamic bat who's an elite defender, it all comes down to health with Byron. We know this. He's made out of paper mache half the time. It feels like broken glass out here, literally like glass. If you guys know him from Samuel Jackson, when he played that character there, Mr. Glass, in those movies. If you know, you know M. Night Shyamalan. I'm getting on tangent here. The point stands. The blockbuster that would happen with the Twins, if it's not Pablo Lopez, it'll be Joe Ryan. It'll more than likely have a Byron Buxton pairing with it if the right price can be hammered out here. So let's get into all the specifics. Let's break down all these players, including Jonathan, and how he would, of course, make more sense in a trade like this than a straight-up deal for Joe Ryan in itself. Because I completely agree with the Mets fans out there that maybe don't love the idea of giving away a Jonathan plus in a package for Joe Ryan, given what you're getting. And I'm not saying that at all, that Joe Ryan would be a poor acquisition. Far from it. I think Ryan is one of the best options, if not the best option for the Mets to trade for this offseason. Not only the potential of him being traded, but how much he'd be a seamless fit in this rotation. The numbers speak for itself down below. But you also have to understand that as good as Joe Ryan is, there's a reason why Jonathan struck out more batters than any other pitcher in minor league baseball this year. There's a reason that Jonathan skyrocketed, becoming the most coveted pitching prospect in this Mets organization, with the exception of Nolan McLean, and to a lesser degree because he leapfrogged in front of him and Brennan Sproat. Now, of course, Ton had his struggles at the major league level when he was abruptly called up, but let's call it how it is. He was abruptly called up, basically going from AA to the bigs, mind you, and he needed an adjustment period, and he's going to continue to need an adjustment period. And that adjustment period is really the biggest selling point for fans that want Joe Ryan now, that are willing to part ways with a top prospect like Jonathan in the process. As much upside as Jonathan has, and as great as his ceiling looks, his ceiling is ace caliber in this Mets rotation, just like Nolan McLean. No doubt about it. His stuff is disgustingly good. What is also true is that the Mets are in a win-now stage. In order to prioritize a win-now stage, you do need to go after win-now players. So there's something to be said about the Mets not only having an adamancy to bolster their rotation with ace-caliber starters for next season, but in order to do so, they have to, of course, make rotation wiggle room. And currently, the Mets have, again, 8 starters under contract expected to impact the club to varying degrees next season. Beginning with the veterans, we have Clay Holmes, David Pearson, Sean Manaea, and if I'm blanking on anyone else there, Kodai Senga, even though I feel very confident that Senga will be traded. Then you have Christian Scott returning from reconstructed Tommy John surgery. Then you, of course, have Noah McLean. Then you have Jonathan, Brandon Sproat. Those are all 8 starters to varying degrees, and I'm not saying they're all going to light the world on fire to begin the season, but the point is that all these players have the potential to impact the Mets to varying degrees next season. And in order for the Mets to make room for a Joe Ryan and also say sign a quality starter, which is the route that they should do, add 2 stars this offseason, one via trade, one the free agent market. The only way that happens is if you make the proper room for it. So Kodai Senga being traded, it goes without saying. We all fully expect that to happen until it, say, doesn't happen. Now, when we look at the prospects, and I said this to you all right from the start of the offseason, there is absolutely a world where at the right price, the Mets would have more of an appetite to trade away one of, if not both of, Brandon Sproat-Jonathan. I will be shocked if the Mets traded both, obviously. I can't see a deal where that would warrant it. Even if they wanted Tarek Skubal, like, I still don't see how that would make sense, knowing he's a rental, as awesome as he is, and as much as I would love Skubal and this rotation, this jury's still out there as to if that man will even be actually heavily shopped this offseason because the Tigers are schmucks. But the Twins, we know, have been on a fire sale, okay? And unfortunately, some Twins fans have still struggled to wrap their head around this, and I really don't know why, considering they've been a small market team forever. They've been a team that operates on the margins completely, and a team that at best is your quick wild card exit. Like, the Twins are a team that's going nowhere in 2026, nor should you believe otherwise. There's a reason why they sold off everyone their mother on this past year's trade deadline, with the exception of Pablo Lopez. And the only reason why they didn't trade Pablo Lopez wasn't because they didn't want to, but because he went down with injury right around the same time, unfortunately. And that derailed his entire second half of the season. Lopez is a contract they would love to part ways with at over $20 million average annual value for the next couple of years. For, again, a guy who can be at your middle of the rotation starter at best, an ace for you. Joe Ryan, they were asking for a Cane's ransom of. You know, you had certain destinations, including, I believe it was Yahoo Sports, that unfortunately initially posted out there that Joe Ryan was being traded to the Boston Red Sox on the deadline, but that was misinformation. They quickly deleted that report after it came out. The Red Sox have tried and will continue to try heavily to land Joe Ryan. And there's an argument to be had that the Red Sox have more immediate assets that are appealing to the Twins now, depending on what exactly the Twins are looking for. Because if the Twins want control of pitching, the Boston Red Sox and the Mets are 1A, 1B when looking at great farms with great MLBS talent that's right on the fringe of top pitching prospects. And the beauty of it is that who has had their hands on all of this? We're going about someone who's had their hands on Joe Ryan, had their hands on the Boston Red Sox past 2 years, and now has his hands on the Mets. That is newly appointed Mets pitching coach Justin Willard. He initially worked in the Twins organization during the time of Joe Ryan still being there in the farm working up. Then he was the pitching director of the Red Sox each of the past 2 years, evaluating all aspects of pitching from literally the minor leagues to the major league level, working with Andrew Bailey, one of the best pitching coaches in all Major League Baseball right now, no doubt about it, to now joining the Mets staff. So there's a lot of interconnection here to give us a great idea as to how good Joe Ryan is and how many assets the Mets would have to pony up in a trade for the coveted right-hander. So how can the Mets sway the Twins away from a team like the Boston Red Sox so the Red Sox don't get a slam dunk of a trade for a second straight year for a controllable starter? They did it for Garrett Crochet and extended him an offseason ago, and the Mets would have loved him. They just didn't have the assets for it at the time. And now fast forward a year later, they would still love Joe Ryan, but I think the Mets would love Joe Ryan even more. And the difference is the Mets are in a better position right now with the depth of their farm and their MLBS ready talent, in my humble opinion, and the opinions of many, to make a deal happen. So before we talk more on Buxton, let's talk a bit more on Joe Ryan. What is the appeal with someone like him? Why would the Mets, to a degree, bend over backwards to bring in the coveted right-hander? Well, as I stated, 30 starts, as you guys see down below, 171 innings, a 3.4 ERA, a 3.4 expected ERA. I love when the ERA and the expected ERA are essentially the same thing, because that tells you that he did not at all get cheated wrongly by, say, bad defense behind him. What you got from the baseline ERAs, and you're identical to his expected numbers, which means he's unbelievably consistent. That's awesome. 3.3 SI ERA, just over a 1 whip, which is very impressive. A 3.8 FIP and 194 strikeouts this past season. Furthermore, for Joe Ryan, who's under club control until he's a free agent in 2028, so you have him for a couple more seasons there for a guy who's entering his age 30 season. But as you guys can see down below, we are looking at a tremendous K to walk ratio. This is what I love when you have guys that are at least in the 10K per nine to right around a 2 walks per nine, if not lower. That's right in the wheelhouse of what I want from an ace caliber starter. But here's what lies the problem with Joe Ryan. I believe it's twofold. Is A, the lack of consistency in innings. The Mets have an adamancy to get innings this offseason. And I understand it's easier said than done to get guys that give you 200 plus, because Reality tells you that outside of guys like Tarek Skubal, a lot of starters in today's game just are not giving you 200 innings anymore, as sad as it is to see. There was a world where 300 wasn't outlandish, but now, when are we ever going to see a guy get 300 innings again? I'll be shocked if it ever happens in my lifetime, because it feels like that ship has sailed. But 171 this past year is very good. 135 the year before is not terrible. 161 the year before, that's not terrible. And then 147. So we're looking at a pitcher who's been averaging right around 160 or so innings when we look collectively each of the past 4 years. So let's just put that at a rough estimate. The numbers have stayed unbelievably consistent. One, looking at the K to walk ratio that you guys can see right here to my right. As you guys can see that I'm kind of, somewhat highlighting, even though it's not doing a great job of highlighting it. You see the K/9 and the walk/9. That's what we're focusing on. Then we have to focus on the home run rate. This is another thing. I have to understand, Joe Ryan has been pitching to a degree in a batter's park half the season. That ball can fly in Minneapolis sometimes, and that's led in hand to a inflated almost 1.4 home run per 9 rate this past season, which is not overly ideal even for a starter. But the good news is that he has not really allowed that to hinder much of his production for someone who's steadily been right around a 2.5 to a 3 WAR player. He's been a 3+ WAR player each of the past 2 seasons for the Twins. So currently, Joe Ryan is projected to give 182 innings next season with a 3.8 ERA with just under 10 K per 9 to just over 2 walks per 9 and a home run rate that's slightly lower per Fangraphs' projections. Of course, projections can mean fickle. I'm not going to tell you to take it more than a grain of salt. But what I will say is that Joe Ryan, if he can stay healthy, this is someone who should be going for the most innings he's ever pitched in his career next season. So, yes, he doesn't have this great track record like a Framber Valdez, someone who's more of a certainty in the amount of innings he can eat, as Valdez had just under 200 this past year. But I also say there is a world where the Mets could sign a Valdez and also trade for a top starter. They have all the assets to trade for a top starter, and they have all the money to sign one. So why not go ahead and do exactly that? Kill 2 birds with 1 stone in that way. Get the job done this offseason and make this rotation have multiple ace caliber starters, so that way you have actually something that you can compete against with more on the service level than what you've ever had before versus teams like the LA Dodgers, among others. So for Joe Ryan, I don't really think there's anyone that believes that he wouldn't be a great fit for the New York Mets. It all just comes down to value and how much it's going to cost someone like him, who, as you guys can see from his Baseball Savant page, does fluctuate a little bit. So let's break down the pros and the cons here, shall we? We got 71st percentile in pitcher run value, 93rd in fastball run value. That's impressive. Right around league average to slightly below league average in breaking run value, and well below league average in off-speed run value. His expected ERA was in the 74th percentile, and for context, the best in baseball is 100. So that's really good company. He's in the top 26% or so. Then we look at, of course, batting average, 82nd percentile in expected batting average. Really good. Fastball velocity, 37 percentile. He sits 94 on the gun, can touch 96 plus. We see average exit velocity, 26 miles per hour. So what does that mean? It means that guys have been able to hit him fairly hard. Not terribly, but at a solid rate at 90 plus miles per hour for exit velo. Chase percentage is just 14 percentile, so he doesn't get the chase that you would hope with a guy like him, but he does get a whiff above league average this past year, and the K and walk rate is what stands out mostly. We see 84th percentile in K percentage, 87th in walk percentage. You know what? If we're not going to get a guy that's going to have ridiculous chase rates, we want someone that's going to be very stable in his K to walk ratio, and Joe Ryan knows how to command that strike zone better than most eligible starters in Major League Baseball. The barrel rate is at a measly 6%, which means he gets barreled often when he does in fact get hit, which is not usually a good thing, which went in hand with the fact of why he had a home run rate of north of 1.4 this past season. 37th percentile in hard hit percentage as well for Joe Ryan. 22nd in ground ball percentage because he's not a ground ball pitcher much, and 80th percentile in extension for his 6'2", 205 frame. So it's actually very good with the extension, given he's not, big like a Tarek Skubal big, but he still gets elite extension. You look at the arsenal too, and this is what's so, I think, enticing for the New York Mets, and in particular Eric Yeagers and Justin Willard in the pitching department. You have the four-seam fastball that he threw right around 50% of the time this past year, sitting 94. He then has all the S's that the Mets love. And what do I tell you guys on the platform? If you don't know, let me enlighten you. It's the 4 S's. It's the sweeps, the slides, the splitties, and the sinks. And he has it all. He has a sweeper at 13% of the arsenal at 81 miles per hour. The splitty at 11% of the arsenal at 87, 88 miles per hour. Sinker at 11% of the arsenal at 93 plus miles per hour. The slider at 9% of the arsenal at 88 miles per hour. And the curve will add him easily 4% of the arsenal at right around 80 miles per hour. So he's got the whole kitchen sink he's throwing at you. And that variety is something that I know the Mets would love to get their hands on when evaluating him. And there's no denying that Joe Ryan would be a seamless fit in this Mets rotation to pair with Noah McLean, and to lesser degrees, Clay Holmes, David Pearson, Sean Manaea, Brandon Sproat, Joe Nathan, depending on if you trade them or not, Christian Scott, who I'm very bullish on entering next season, honestly. I think there's a lot of upside. Everyone's writing off Christian Scott like he wasn't putting up some of the best pitching rates in the minor leagues, with the exception of Paul Skeens during that same time frame. That's not an exaggeration. That's how good Christian Scott was looking. And then, of course, he was batting practice every start for at least one home run because he was still dealing with the partially torn UCL. But now that that's all cleaned up, we might see the best of Christian Scott yet. And that is what I'm hoping for. Now, Joe Ryan, I relayed all the numbers, guys. Also, if we go back to his ERA, 3.6 in 2024 with a 2.8 expected. 4.5 in 2023, but a 3.5 expected, which means he had a lot of bad luck. So that's where I'm more focused on, the expected ERA. Year before that, 3.5 with a 3.5 expected. So he has steadily sat right around a 3.5 career ERA pitcher that you guys can see. And the expected numbers are very good. So I love that you know exactly what you're getting in Joe Ryan. And there's no real gap in his ERA to expected ERA to say they had terrible defense behind him. And, you know, in part, this goes in direct hand because he had elite defense behind him at times, especially in that outfield, when he had someone like Byron Buxton and the Wings making show-stopping catches there that you saw in center, as well as having a dynamic bat that took major strides in the right direction this past season. That's where we're going to now pivot the conversation before we talk more on Jonathan's value and how a blockbuster can truly be had here. Because, like I said, if you guys want to go with the belief that the Mets are not at all interested in Byron Buxton, you're more than entitled to feel that way. That is fine. But I'm never trying to do anything to purposely steer you guys in the wrong direction. And this is perfectly fitting that I can have this conversation with you, because my information on Byron Buxton I've known about for quite some time. But outside of my recent conversations I've broken down explaining how Byron is a guy who I know the Mets like, I've been waiting for a more worthy conversation with the Mets connected to Joe Ryan to further lump them together, because that's where it makes more logical sense than ever. If you're going to give up a haul from the Mets' point of view, this is what warrants giving up a haul. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Wardy, listen, Byron Buxton's a human highlight reel. We all know this. It's not about him being a good player or not, but rather him being able to stay healthy. And that's where we have our biggest divide with Byron. And I do not fault any Mets fan at all for exemplifying those risks and concerns, because you're 100% valid and right to feel that way. As someone who's wanted Byron Buxton on this team each of the past north of 5 years right now, I know he's been made of paper mache. I know that he's been Mr. Glass out here. He's coming off of the best season of his career in 126 games, mind you, so still like a 40-game gap for the most part of a full 162. 542 plate appearances for Byron, of course, is not a free agent until 2029 on a very team-friendly contract. 97 runs scored, 35 home runs, 83 RBIs, 24 stolen bases, a 264 average, a 327 on base, a 551 slug, good for a full 5 WAR season, which simply means Byron Buxton himself accounted for 5 wins alone for the Twins this past year, which is very respectable, and 36% above league average as a batter per his WRC plus, which is weighted runs created plus, which is essentially the same as OPS plus from Fangraphs to Baseball Reference. It's on a scale of 100. If you're above 100, you're above league average as a batter. If you're below 100, you're below league average as a batter. So what is so appealing for Byron Buxton? Because you say to yourself, Wardy, listen, Kyle Tucker's out there, Cody Bellinger's out there, maybe less power implementing bats, but guys that can help you with the well-rounded defense. The Steven Quads are out there, a guy who did have who had 22 home runs this past year, but is still just getting his career started. Wilyer Abreu, you know, you think of Jaron Duran. There's abundance of guys that make levels of sense for this Mets outfield. But what does Byron Buxton do to help separate himself? Well, one, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone if you do a blockbuster trade here. And that is what I think is very appealing about this. Secondly, Byron, yes, he has the risk with his lack of health, but I think there's a fairly simple solution to maximize his health. And this goes in direct hand with meeting Pete Alonso's needs as someone who would like to return the Mets, but of course knows that if he does return the Mets, he's going to need to get more DH reps. So what is a logical route for Byron Buxton to have success with the Mets over the next couple of years while hopefully giving the Mets at least 120 plus games? What you do is the following. Byron is an elite center fielder, like a tremendous one. One of the best, if not the best in baseball when he is truly right. The problem with Byron, again, has been his lack of ability to stay on the field. So how do you maximize his ability? You lessen the reps in center field. That's how you start. So what I would mean by this is, in a world where, say, the Mets acquired Byron Buxton as their lone outfield acquisition this offseason of significance because they want room for Carson Bench. Let's go with that hypothetical for a second, okay? So Carson Bench profiles best as a left field option instead of center. Not that he can't handle center, but he feels like someone who's going to be better in left field as he develops in his career. This is what you do. You start Byron Buxton to begin the season in center with the assumption that Carson Bench does not crack the team out of camp. And if he does, then you get very creative. And I think you platoon the two, depending on circumstances, based on matchups, among other things, between who's in center and who's in left. And then what you also do is you split Byron's playing time from the outfield to DH. And you have him DH solely on the days that you have Pete Alonso at first. If you want to give Alonso, let's say hypothetically, a 60-40 split where he maybe gets 60% of the time at first and 40% of the time at DH, which means the other percent of the time would go to Byron Buxton more than likely. Or it could be reverse, where maybe you want Alonso to get more of his reps than not at the DH position, okay? So less DH reps for Buxton. But the point stands. In order to maximize a player who's as talented as Buxton is, but has struggled to stay on the field, the best way to do so is to lessen his ability to actually be out there playing defense. Now, I know you say to yourself, Wardy, that kind of feels counterintuitive for the Mets then if they're really trying to shore up their outfield defense. Why would it make sense to go out of your way to trade for Buxton, who you know is going to cost quality assets, if you're not even going to have him play in the outfield every day? But again, there's more to him than just his defense. His defense is tremendous, but don't you want his defense maximized for as much as you could possibly have him, instead of just getting a great limited sample size and then he's out the entire second half with injury for something that could have been avoided by maybe not going for a ball in center that, you know, he shouldn't have dived out for because we know he's made of glass half the time? This is how you do it. So this is something that I've been thinking about and pondering for a while, ever since I heard through the industry that the Mets love Byron, and they definitely would love to have him. It just comes down to, again, his willingness to waive his no-trade clause, and most importantly, hammering out a trade that makes sense for both sides. Because you say to yourself, Byron Buxton's going to cost you a good amount of assets as is. He's on a team-friendly contract. So how much more would it be if the Mets landed him and Joe Ryan? And the answer is you're probably giving up a lot of assets. You're giving up more than likely Jonathan. You're more than likely going to have to give up, of course, at least one of your more top infield prospects, whether that is someone like a Jet Williams or, to a lesser degree, an A.J. Ewing, who thrived and skyrocketed in the farm this past year. Could they have an appetite for Jacob Reimer separately instead of A.J. Ewing? Possibly, but Reimer's defense still has a lot of developing to do. He's a bat-first player from how well he performed in the farm for the Mets this past year, especially in Double-A. So you look at the abundance of options the Mets have on the farm right now. They have the assets to make it happen. And in my opinion, I don't think that there is one single prospect, with the exception of Carson Bench, and Noel McLean isn't a prospect anymore, so I don't even lump him in this conversation. With the exception of Carson Bench, I think every other prospect should be on the table for this kind of blockbuster. Because this is the kind of move that, as long as Joe Ryan performs to expectation, as long as Byron Buxton can give you 100 to 120 plus games, maybe even more next year if he gets more DH reps than he's ever had in his career to really maximize his health, that's the kind of move that makes the Mets go from being a contender to, okay, they actually look like that they're going to be in the World Series conversation. With the, of course, assumptions that you, A, bring back Edwin Diaz, and B, hopefully bring back Pete Alonso. Because think about it, guys. If you have an outfield configuration next year of something along the lines of Juan Soto, Byron Buxton, Carson Bench, there is so much upside there. It's crazy. Yes, there's risk involved, and yes, that's why the Mets would still be inclined, in my opinion, to go after another outfield type that is an upgrade over Tyrone Taylor, but maybe he's still more of a stopgap option instead of a guy that you really want there every single day. I think it's important that the Mets have that depth and that versatility. And maybe they'll have it in-house with guys I'm not even accounting for. If they say didn't trade Jet Williams, maybe he would get more looks in the outfield than what we were initially thinking. There's a belief out there that he could profile really well in the outfield. You know, Luis Angel Acuna, I fully expect to be traded this offseason, but if he's not, he's someone who can handle the outfield rather comfortably. You know, there are options for the Mets to consider, but the point stands. You want to maximize a team in a win-now stage that doesn't want to give up every asset of their farm. I think that this is a healthy balance in order to do so. So to expand more on Byron Buxton, because again, those numbers are great, but let's continue to talk more about the pros and cons here. And actually, let's play this highlight for a second, because he is now going to make a great catch and save what would have been at least a double, if not more, if not a home run, for Joe Ryan. So shout out Byron Buxton making a nice catch at the wall there in the highlights a second ago, guys. You guys see that nice jump? Stud. Now, let's go into a little bit more on Byron Buxton. Let's talk again more on the lack of health certainty. Because as I said, it's a complete risk, no doubt about it, by investing in someone like him. And as you guys can see, Byron Buxton has been in the major leagues since his age 21 season as a top prospect in 2015, who I've loved from the start, mind you. Just the most truly five-tool talent in baseball when fully healthy. That's how I feel about Byron Buxton. I don't think there's any player more talented, truthfully, than Byron when he's fully healthy and at his best. I felt this way since basically 2021, and nothing has changed about that in my opinion, other than the fact of his lack of ability to stay on the field. But he's been in the league for a decade, and he only has 3 seasons under his belt with 100 games or more. Completely justified to be deterred from that. No doubt about it. But he's coming off of back-to-back seasons with 100-plus games for the first time in his career, mind you. And he just came off the biggest sample size in his career, and he put up really good numbers, mind you. Buxton is a career right around, 14% above league average hitter, but that goes in because he's had just such fluctuating numbers. It's crazy. Like, in the shortened 2020 season, Byron Buxton casually hit 13 home runs in 39 games. Like, what? Then you see in 61 games in 2021 due to injury, he had 19 home runs. He batted .306 with a 71% above league average as a batter. Like, insane numbers here. But Byron has been known for his speed through and through. That's why he's an elite defender. That's why he's a great base runner. But he struggled to steal bags consistently in his career, not just because of the lack of health, because of how many games he plays, but because of the fact that they want to lessen his injury risk. So there's something to be said about Byron Buxton not only having a greater sample size than ever in 2025 and games played and plate appearances, but 24 stolen bases means this man is absolutely a lock if he gives you around the same games as next year to be a 30-plus stolen bag guy. If Juan Soto can steal just under 40 stolen bags, I'm inclined to believe Byron Buxton can at minimum do the same. He is absolutely elite with his base running, and I've admired this player for so long, so I will continue to beat this drum until A, he gets traded elsewhere, or B, that he actually lands with the New York Mets. So Byron is someone I completely understand all the pros and cons with. He had a 5-WAR season this year. Then he had a 4-WAR season roughly the year before that. In 2023, in 85 games, he had a .5-WAR season because he was very Jekyll and Hyde with his consistency with his bat. He had 17 home runs in 85 games and 49 runs scored, but a .207 average leaves quite a bit to be desired. So Byron, due to the health, has not been that consistent player. And Luis Robert, we talked about, another player in our video from technically today that we dropped right around 12:30 a.m. Another guy that struggled with the track record in consistency and in health. But Buxton's floor is far greater than Luis Robert when looking at their ability on the field. Furthermore, when you take a look at Byron Buxton and his percentiles with Baseball Savant this past season, there's a good amount of things to be happy about, okay? Like a lot of things. 94th percentile in batting run value. 99th in base running value. He's the best base runner in baseball. I'm not even joking. He literally is. Better than Tyrone Taylor. 66th percentile in fielding run value. 81st in XWOBA, league average and expected batting average, 92nd percentile in expected slugging, 92nd in average exit velocity, 96th in barrel percentage, 96th in hard hit percentage, well below league average in sweet spot percentage, 88th in bat speed, well below league average in squared up, whiff, and K percentage. He swung and missed a lot this past year, but it really didn't matter. He still had 35 home runs and put up a respectable .264 average with a .551 slug. Think about it this way, guys. So you're telling me it's a Byron Buxton that's going to bat in similarity on the contact to BLOCKBUSTER, but he's going to slug far greater than Nimmo consistently. And the most important thing, BLOCKBUSTER is a net negative defensively. Byron Buxton is one of the best defenders in baseball. As you guys can see, 81st percentile in outs above average, league average in arm value, well above league average in arm strength, which is what would increase his value as someone who would get reps at center and or left at 77th. But the sprint speed at 100th percentile, guys, I'm salivating at the mouth. I understand, once more, Byron Buxton is maybe not the best fit for the team versus a Cody Bellinger. I think Bellinger checks off more boxes for this team right now and would make more logical sense. So I'm not saying that Buxton is a lock to happen. I'm not saying that this blockbuster is a surefire guaranteed thing. If that was the case, then all the moves I've talked about of potential for the Mets throughout the offseason would have came to fruition by now. But that's not how this works, sadly. That's not the nature of the beast. The nature of the beast is that the Mets are going to show interest in a wide array of players and to varying degrees of varying talents. And what we do here on the platform is we discuss every single option. That way there's no stone unturned. And that way when the breaking news happens, like when the Mets signed Devin Williams, anyone that's been following the platform is far from surprised by that. We've talked about Devin Williams numerous times this offseason as a player that the Mets really like, someone they're targeting, and how he makes logical sense because of his David Stearns connection and someone who I think could be a perfect setup man for Edwin Diaz in the way that Ryan Helsley failed to be at this past year's trade deadline. So, getting back to it, Byron Buxton has a full no trade. Why would he waive a full no trade? The same reason why Brandon Nimmo waived his full no trade, even with 5 years left on his contract. He waived his full no trade because the Mets made it clear that the only thing that was holding the trade back was Nimmo. And Nimmo respected that and made it happen because he saw that the Mets are going in a different direction, that they think they're better without him. And for the Rangers, they really want him. So if the Mets show this further adamancy that they love and really want Buxton, I'm sure that's a great sell to Byron, who knows that he would be joining not only a big market, but an organization that has the adamancy to try to win now specifically in ways that the Twins are going nowhere. They just hired Derek Shelton as their manager. Cody Clemens looks like they're going to be their first base option. I mean, what are we talking about here? Any Twins fan trying to sell you on that team going anywhere in 2026, unfortunately, still stuck in the delusion like they're ever going to get over their hump as a small market team that continues to move on the margins, that doesn't want to spend big. There is a reason why the Twins are never going to win a championship anytime soon. And I'm not here to flex the Mets guns when it comes to wins, because we know they're few and far in between when it comes to winning a championship, but it has not been for a lack of effort. And that's the difference. And when I see a lack of effort, I'm not even talking on-field prod, because the Mets rolled over and died from mid-June on this year. We all know that. I'm talking solely in the sense of Steve Cohen and David Stearns and what their roles are for this organization. The Twins are not operating as a team that's expecting to win anytime soon. The Mets are. So if the Mets go ahead and if they haven't already to the Twins and say, listen, we would love Byron Buxton, we love Joe Ryan, let's try to hammer out a 2-for-1 blockbuster trade. Let's get this done. Of course, the Twins are going to ask for a Kane's ransom, but this is the exception, because you're checking off so many boxes with these players, and you will then have much less to do this offseason as to what a priority is, okay? So, yes, I would still like the Mets to sign a quality starter in the free agent market if they don't trade for someone separately from acquiring Joe Ryan. Yes, I want Alonso back. Yes, I want Diaz back. And yes, I want them to continue to shore up their bullpen. But the point stands, if you make a move like this, this is not only what defines the offseason for the Mets, but this is what continues to get asses in seats. This is the kind of blockbuster that has everyone wanting to spend, what? Their entire kid's tuition on opening day tickets. I'm only half joking as I say this because we just had record-breaking attendance at Citi Field this past year. They've raised the prices, sadly, and everyone's still going to show up. If the Mets perform at all, they're going to show up. Mets fans are great. For better or for worse, they're going to show up. And there's more justified reasons than ever to show up, and the Mets put more effort and more interest into a win-now stage for next season than they ever had before under the David Stearns regime. That is what we're longing for. That's what we need to see happen. And yes, can the Mets have a slam dunk offseason without landing Joe Ryan and Byron Buxton? Absolutely. Of course. I'm not losing sleep if they don't land these guys, but I am losing sleep if they don't land these guys and say they get traded to a rival in the NL, especially the NL East, mind you, like the Braves, who would love Buxton, who's a Georgia native. So we got to make sure that doesn't happen, hopefully. I don't want to see him pair with Ronald Acuna Jr. I'm getting scared just thinking about it. But the point stands. If the Mets are really serious about maximizing the assets that they have and balancing the trade and free agent market, this is a no-brainer for them to heavily consider if they have not done so already. So once more, before we wrap it up, what would it take? I firmly believe it's going to take, obviously, a Jonathan. And as much as I love Jonathan, no Mets fan should be hesitating by parting ways with him in a trade of this significance. Because as great as Jonathan looks and appears he can be, and this is not at all slight on him, I do not want him traded. I'd like to make that clear. I don't want most of any Mets prospects traded. I just have to talk about it because you have to give to get. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the game, right? You can't just ask for top players from teams and not expect to give up quality assets in return. I know that's worked out for the Dodgers in the past and the Yankees because they've had teams that have just rolled over to them, unfortunately. I don't anticipate that to be the case with the Steve Cohen and David Stearns Ram Mets. But what I do anticipate is that the New York Mets are so perfectly primed positioned to make this kind of move happen that it would be so counterintuitive for them to not heavily consider. So we know they really like Joe Ryan. We know they're in that market. And we know they really like Byron Buxton, not just from the whispers that you've heard from other articles saying how he's a logical fit for the Mets, but you're hearing it from myself, the horse's mouth, that can tell you in confidence, the Mets love Byron Buxton. Like I said, going back to the start of the show, and I'll say it again, I just don't know how much they like him, say more, than a Cody Bellinger, then a Kyle Tucker, then a Luis Robert, then a Jarren Duran, then a Stephen Kwan, then a Wilyer Abreu. The list goes on and on from there. So jury's still out as to how much interest the Mets have someone in Buxton and how realistic this is to happen. But if you have a trade centerpiece around Jonathan, around some of our other top prospects, around at least one of guys like Mark Vientos, Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, if not two of them, the Mets could part ways with multiple, and they wouldn't lose any sleep next season because they don't need them right now heading into next year. Truthfully, they don't. They have an abundance of riches when evaluating their infield options from the farm to the major league level. Take advantage of that, especially when a Twins team could actually maximize more of the value out of said players, and to a degree, like even a Mark Vientos, so I think could thrive if he's more of that DH profile for the Twins next season at in a park where that ball could really fly half the year. I see the potential. So all this is to say, I love Byron Buxton. I would love him on this Mets team. I would really like Joe Ryan, and I think that it would be silly if the Mets don't find themselves more heavily in this market than what we know reportedly to this point. So Mets fans, thank you guys so much again for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please do not hesitate from letting me know all your thoughts, comments, questions, and concerns in the comments down below to everything that we broke down in this one on the front of Byron Buxton, Joe Ryan. And before we get out of here, everybody, because I did promise you guys there was just one final thing that I did want to make mention of, and this is just miscellaneous regarding the Mets that you guys can hear briefly. Either later tonight or tomorrow we'll have more content dropping regarding other Mets topics, but I really wanted this to be centralized to just this potential Mets-Twins blockbuster. But as you guys see here, David Mervis, thank you to Coach. I'm gonna butcher that last name. David Mervis has joined the Mets minor league pitching staff as one of their pitching coaches, I should say. So congratulations to David Mervis on X, who posted this, another new hire for the New York Mets that we'll talk about more, I'm sure, in the coming days when there's more things to talk about on the front of their pitching hires. And one final thing that I did want to relay to each and every one of you, and this comes from my own personal X account that you can follow me at WardyNYM. Let's go down here just for a second, everybody. I want to make sure that I don't miss anything on this front. And it is the following. The Washington Nationals have now pried away two key fixtures in the Mets front office over the past week, which I do not like. I have to be transparent. The Washington Nationals are hiring Grayson Crawford as director of pitching. League sources said, according to Wolf Sam of The Athletic, Crawford has worked for the Mets the last couple of seasons, first as AAA pitching coach and most recently as assistant pitching coordinator. So again, this was someone who had his hands all over the Mets' top prospects in Brandon Sproat and Noel McLean and Jonathan. And now he's going to take that expertise and everything he's learned in the Mets org to our rivals in the Washington Nationals. And this is the second fairly big move the Nats have made, because he also was previously with the Yankees organization, their minor leagues, doing great jobs before the Mets hired him, mind you, just for some context. But the other hire was the fact that they pried away from the Mets front office our analytics guru, essentially, that maximize analytics for the MLB draft. So the Mets, who have done stellar with their drafting each of the past 2 years under David Stearns, lost to Domino a piece of that puzzle, sadly, because he moved to now VP of Scouting in the Nationals front office, as they, of course, are reshaping everything for them now that they're under, new management and down. So, yeah, Nationals, F off. Stop taking our guys, okay? I get it. You're giving them greater roles than what they currently have in the Mets organization. I understand that we're not going to lose too much sleep over this, but nonetheless, F out of here. Please stop. And Ron Washington also got hired by the San Francisco Giants to be their infield coach. Very envious of that. I told you guys at the start of the coaching search for the Mets this offseason, I really wanted Ron Washington as either the third base coach for the Mets or someone in the infield in general, because I really think Ron Washington is a brilliant mind, not only going back to his time, of course, with the Atlanta Braves, where he had a lot of success there as their third base coach. I think about him going all the way back in the day when he was manager, if I'm not mistaken, for the Texas Rangers, among others. Again, if I apologize if I have that team wrong, I sincerely did not mean to say that wrongly. Most recently with the Angels, lack of success, but Artie Moreno's a schmuck. They're never going to go anywhere as long as that man is running ship and still running baseball ops as owner of that team. He's horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But that's enough of my tangents. That's enough of miscellaneous topics. Thank you guys again. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your night to evening, whenever you're watching this. This is Wardy signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out, folks.